in the final stretch, in the final countdown for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis Journey event to come to Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And I figured since we spent basically the first 6 months of 2023 building up to Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, why don't we go ahead and do a review? Cal Kestis, Cere, JUNDA, Merrin, Tarrful, and GERRERA. So let's get down into it. So there's no confirmation yet in regards to when the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis Journey event's going to drop. And if you click on the card in the top right-hand corner, I basically get what I believe to be true for the release date, which is going to be the last week of June. If you want to know how I got to that conclusion, go check out that video. But now all the requirements are free-to-play farmable. Which one should you build up first? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So why don't we start off with the worst one and work our way up? So I think out of all the requirements for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, the worst one out of all of them is GERRERA. Fun fact, I usually do reviews on all the new characters and stuff like that. This one I completely just skipped out on because I was so disappointed. And I thought this character was maybe so bad to the point where I thought I was wrong. Well, it's been a little bit since GERRERA came out, and I was right. He's not that great. And it surprises me. I feel like GERRERA should have been a bigger deal in the game. It sounded good on paper, but really, it just didn't hit the road running. So GERRERA was pitched to us as a way to make your leftover rebels useful, but there's a lot of filters to go through. You have your Rogue One, which is probably the best non-legendary rebel team in the game, and then you have the Rebel Fighters of Kyle Katarn, and at the very end, you're going through 2 layers of filters, and whatever you have left over, which is generally Wedge, Biggs, Troot, and maybe Baze, that goes on this team. The good thing that he has going for him is that he's a fairly decent fast character, which means you could get out there fairly early, and the whole goal is to get out there, set the explosive traps, and as the enemy takes a lot of turns, eventually it'll blow up, dealing damage equal to 30% of GERRERA's max health. And there's a lot of ways to make his max health go up through mods and also Omicrons and whatnot. For whatever reason, it's just not enough. It could be the rest of the Rebel fighters just really aren't cutting it after it goes through several filters. On defense, we see things like Imperial Troopers get through it, General Grievous, even Geonosians, a lot of low-level teams, which you don't really want to see at a Kyber level. Again, at lower levels, this might be okay for you. Then on offense, not a lot of people doing a lot of useful stuff with it. It really is beating those low-level teams like old school Night Sisters, Ewoks, Phoenix. Not a ton happening. So I'm feeling pretty confident right now that this guy might be missing something, maybe an Omicron on another character like Wedge or Biggs, for this team to really start running. As it stands now, I feel like GERRERA is probably the worst out of all of them. And likely you're going to want to build this guy a blast unless you got a lot of rebels, you're in an earlier tier of the game. You might get a bit more mileage with the guy. Overall, disappointed. I was hoping for a lot more out of GERRERA. We're going to put Tarrful at number 4 on the requirements for Cal Kestis. This, not as bad as GERRERA. Definitely before GERRERA came, this was running to be one of the more lackluster requirements for Cal Kestis. The pitch was Tarrful is supposed to take advantage of your Wookiees that are left over and put them on a team. So we're talking about Zalbar, veteran smuggler Han, and veteran smuggler Chewbacca getting some love. Again, I like characters that are taking advantage of things that are just sitting around, and you want to make the most out of the efficiency of your roster. And you could do some stuff with Tarrful. The whole goal is this team is one of the more durable, non-legendary teams in the game. And as you're being hit more and more and more, the hope and prayer is that Zalbar is going to use his AoE and pop the enemy like no other. There's not a lot of damage on this team unless they ramp up enough and have enough defense. And there's a lot of teams that can end up beating this and not too much that they can do on offense. In a Kyber setting, you really want to make sure you're not being beaten by, for example, Bad Batch, Wampas, Imperial Troopers. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case. Bad Batch dunks on this team big time. You can sometimes get Wampa to get through it. Imperial Troopers just mow over this team, and you would think that the Wookiees would have enough to counteract the Imperial Troopers, but not quite. Too many lowish tier teams getting through it, which at the end of the day is not something you want to see on a defensive lineup. If we take a look at the offensive side of things, it does some okay stuff. You know, I've seen a couple of lineups where the Wookiees can take out a Qui-Gon Jinn team, which isn't all that bad. You know, you have such high defense, they could survive Anakin popping off. If you get lucky, maybe Commander Luke Skywalker doing a little bit more than GERRERA. But overall, this was just an okay addition to Galaxy of Heroes, making the Wookiees a little bit better and at least making a team that never existed before and finally getting at least a little bit of respect for a Wookiee faction in this game. So we're getting into the top 3, and the top 3 is definitely where things get really interesting And some might argue we're splitting hairs, but I think it's kind of clear what the order of top 3 is. Number 3, the third best requirement for the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis is going to be Cal Kestis himself. The great thing about Cal Kestis is that he plugs into like one of 2 major lineups inside of Galaxy Spheres. If you're a Galactic Legend Ray owner, you're going to love Cal Kestis. Cal Kestis is basically a pure support character through and through, nearly no damage on the guy, but he's going to heal up the team a lot, recover protection, which is not a very common thing, dispel debuffs, and more importantly, on I'm Persistent, he is supercharging the health and tenacity of the teams that he's on. Getting 30% max health is absolutely astronomical on the Galactic Legends Ray, or as we're going to talk about later, Cere JUNDA. And even though Capital Games didn't really intend for this character to be great with Ray, he is amazing with Ray and really can alter the battle and drag it on a lot longer with all the health increase and the healing capabilities. And of course, his unique ability, I'm Persistent, allows him to apply a ton of debuffs and feed a ton of turn meter to his team. And the good thing is you can also technically put him on a Star Killer team. Visas Mars is generally the weakest member of a Star Killer team, and Cal Kestis does okay in there. Not necessary, not as impactful as Ray or Cere JUNDA, but nonetheless, kind of nice to have. The second best requirement for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis has to be Merrin. I said earlier, I'm a fan of characters that bring a non-existent faction into life, but I'm also a bigger fan of a single character supercharging a legacy team that a lot of people have sitting around and wanting a little bit more firepower out of. That is going to be Merrin. So much fun, bringing Nisus to a higher power on the offensive side of things, to the point where we now have a reasonable 2-shot non-galactic legend path to get through Jabba the Hutt, a character which before, excluding Datacrons, you basically needed a galactic legend or a mini galactic legend to get through the guy. Well, not anymore with Merrin. You send in Merrin, Night Sisters, Plague just destroys Jabba's team. Generally, Jabba's by himself. You send in your Rebel Fighters, Imperial Troopers, whatever the case might be, Iden Versio at the very end. You got through without a galactic legend, giving you a lot more tactical supremacy on the offensive side of things and the off-meta game. Outside of that, I truly feel like Merrin and the Night Sisters now can beat pretty much any other team in the game from an offensive standpoint. Outside the galactic legend space, I've been able to, for example, just decimate Dr. Aphra, Commander Luke Skywalkers with ease. Things like General Anakin Skywalker and anti-revive things will be still challenging, but nonetheless, they're bringing Night Sisters to a whole other level that they just haven't seen before. On the defensive side of things, she's not doing a ton. Night Sisters still generally can get bypassed by Imperial Troopers, sometimes a Wampa, but it does help increase the chances of it working on defense. Bounty Hunters can still get through, so a lot of old school counters still make it through, so we're not going to see probably Merrin do a ton on defense. The one downside that I don't like about Merrin is that the main good ability about her, Shadow Stride, requires her to be a Gear 12, which again, you need her a Gear 12 anyways for the Cal Kestis event. It's a very short-term problem, but nonetheless, making it hard to low gear cheese her. And then by order of deduction, I'm sure you guys can figure out what the best requirement is, in my opinion, for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis. I'm going to call it Cere JUNDA. Now, I do want to note, I think you really are going to need the Omicron on her for the Grand Arena performance that I like from her. Otherwise, I think without Omicron, she's a little bit lackluster. So I do want to note that. However, when she does have that Omicron, she is one of the most flexible leads in this game. As you know, as you progress through the game, you're going to be collecting a lot of unaligned Force users, whether dark or light, that either you just don't use anymore, like Scavenger Ray, maybe Baby Kylo. Maybe you'll have Fulcrum Ahsoka laying around because you built different territories. You want her to be usable inside of Grand Arena. Or sometimes as your teams grow and evolutionize into the next level, like Inquisitors, once you get Reva, you kind of kick out Second Sister and Ninth Sister. You don't use them anymore. They have a home here. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren doesn't really need Kylo Ren Mask, but he's great in the Cere JUNDA lineup. So basically what I'm trying to say is she is basically, I want to say, the Captain Rex of the unaligned Force users. And I guess that's actually not too far from the truth, because she basically has an aerial advantage on determined assault. Even myself, I've actually lost a few Grand Arenas in 3v3 or 5v5 because of her. And the great thing is, I think as the game continues to expand and grow, new unaligned Force users come, or other unaligned Force users kind of lose their purpose. She's basically the home for abandoned unaligned Force users, and she makes them something special. I wouldn't say quite as nutty as Zori and the Resistance. That's a whole other breed of holy cow. But nonetheless, Cere Junda on defense, you almost need something decent. You kind of need gas, or even a star killer. Even Commander Luke can struggle when you have the Omicron on, which prevents the days. Bad Batch is almost impossible to beat them. It almost seems like Traya is kind of the best budget way of handling them, and that's still kind of an expensive team. And that's basically it right there. All the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis requirements. As you're building them up, I kind of recommend building them in that order that I have set out for you. Let me know your thoughts down below. How are you guys feeling about the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis requirements? For me, overall, I guess it's easy since there's 5 characters. I'd say this is an easy 3 out of 5 package deal for Jedi Knight Cal Kestis journey event requirements. Boy, that's a lot of words. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Truly an honor and privilege to have you all here today. So let me know. I love hearing your opinions down below. Leave that like, comment down below. Be sure to subscribe so you're not missing a thing. And always remember how it's great to be in the Empire today.
Oh, it's great to be in the Empire today. The sun never sets.